2018 election, which I agree with you. I mean, this is job one. It is very, very, very important to do everything possible to show and to prove at the ballot box that Donald Trump is not going to be validated by the American people, that this is not, something that that we're all signing on to here, that whatever happened in 2016 is going to be rectified by common sense among, American voters. But, let's keep in mind that, the midterm elections are almost always referendums on the president. That's what it normally, barring some external event like 9/11, for instance, which ended up sort of giving George Bush the advantage in the 2002 election that he probably would not have had if it weren't for 9/11.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean
he was mired in just in September of September 10th. He was looking pretty wounded. 2000.
I mean, he wasn't getting his agenda. I mean, and in those days too, the Democrats. I mean, talk about supine. I mean, they were rushing to help him pass tax cuts and do all that stuff. I mean, this was it was. Let's give the current Democrats enough credit for at least saying that they're not joining in vast numbers like they did.
It was a much worse. I mean, this is the thing that I try and explain to people who are youngins. It was much worse, I think, back then. I mean, obviously, following 9/11, and granted, we're only 9 months into this presidency. Who knows what's going to happen in month 12 or 13? But it was much worse. The Democrats were worse, and the administration was very competent in doing bad things. This administration is incompetent. They want to do bad things. They are degrading things, but in some ways, the way they're going about it and the fact that Democrats haven't capitulated, which is maybe because of the way that Donald Trump goes about it, is you get the sense that there are people biding their time more rather than, fully capitulating in the way that they did during the Bush years. But I also got to say, we talked about this briefly the other day, that, there's a real sense that I get that people are just exhausted by this. Mm-hmm. That people are in some ways are just trying to tune out. I sort of feel like, people went away in the summer for their vacations and said, I'm going to take a week where I'm not going to, follow the news or something like that. And then we're just like, oh my God, I feel much better than, and that is, I think, really, honestly, that is a danger. I mean, I feel like the whole Clinton years from 92 to 2000, that's what that was. It seems to me was just like, people left of center saying, oh, thank God we have no Reagan, and the Reagan era is over. Now I can go back to leading my life like I wanted to and don't have to pay attention to politics. And it metastasized during that time.
Oh, I think it's absolutely true. I mean, I certainly feel it. I personally feel it. And I know that if this weren't my job, if I wasn't required, I would be pulling back a lot, because it is emotionally very, very difficult to. I mean, my level of anger and frustration, and just this daily astonishment at what I'm watching take place. I mean, there was a level of stimulation in all of that during the election and in the immediate, first few months of the Trump administration, where it was a train wreck. You couldn't take your eyes off of it. And now it's bad enough and overwhelming enough, I think, that you can't look anymore. I mean, there's a sense, I know, among people that I know, and it's certainly among my readers, I get the sense, and some of them are being explicit about it, which is just, I can't do this anymore. I can't, I gotta step back. This is too much, and that is a very, very dangerous thing. I hadn't thought about the Clinton comparison, but I think you may be right. That at that point, I mean, I was watching pretty closely in the 90s. That it was overwhelming, and I think a lot of liberals kind of said, hey, Clinton's got this, and he's in the White House, and he's, having to flail against this bombardment from the right, and it became really difficult and unpleasant and uncomfortable to kind of watch it on any kind of in a detailed, focused way. So I think people did withdraw, and I think the same thing is happening here, and that is very dangerous. And it's not because you're right in pointing out that Trump is incompetent, and in some ways that's a saving grace in many ways, that he's unable to accomplish most of what's going to the bad things that are happening so far are in discrete areas. He has put competent people into the immigration area in the Department of Homeland Security and in the Department of Justice with Sessions. That group of people, and I don't know from within how much resistance there is. I get the sense that in the Department of Justice there is a little bit of resistance, at least coming from places like,
career people.
Career people who are kind of, if nothing else, they're dragging their feet in implementing some of the worst. But those two areas, law enforcement, the authoritarian side of the federal government. In fact, the head of the DEA just resigned because he couldn't go along with the program. So there are areas that are working, but for the most part, everything is it's badly managed. Everything about it, they aren't putting people in place. They can't get anybody confirmed. They're not hiring anybody. People are quitting. I mean, it's a mess. It's a major, major mess, and that is terrible because lives are going to be affected by the federal government ineptitude. But it's not as if Dick Cheney was there, directing every, agency across the government to be implementing this malevolent right-wing agenda. I mean, that much we're not seeing. But, the horror show, there's plenty of time, and, what he can do by accident is so extreme. I mean, we've seen this with what is happening with North Korea. That this is, I mean, I'm as scared, I think, as I've ever been. I haven't thought about nuclear war in 20 years, 30 years really, since Reagan was in, and suddenly, this is part of my consciousness again, and that is very, very uncomfortable feeling. I can understand why everybody's kind of go, oof, I need a break. I got to take a break. I mean, we can't really, because it's still happening, whether we're paying attention or not.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos